I'm Chris Motz, and welcome to The Good Life. Around our kitchen table, we talk about the stuff that matters. So pull up a chair as we visit with real people and talk about love, loss, sacrifice, and salvation. At this kitchen table, we don't have all the answers, but we do believe that life is good. And we want you to hear the stories of everyday heroes living the good life. Before I introduce our first guest, I want to say a word about this show, The Good Life. The world we live in seems like loneliness and fear are at all-time highs, while love and relationships are at all-time lows. Things feel divided in our communities and in our nation. We've forgotten to have conversations about things that matter, and so we don't have them. And not having them makes things worse. It's a sorry cycle. One of those hot topics in the state of South Dakota is unborn life and the challenges that women may face if a pregnancy is unexpected and, frankly, unwanted. It's a topic that, even if it's hard to talk about, it's with us. It's before voters this November. On this show, we think that life is good. It's worth talking about. It's worth talking about the stuff that really makes life worth living. We also know that each one of us can be a mixed bag. Here we want to talk about the real stuff, heartache and tears and all. So it's our commitment to have conversations with respect and love, but also to not shy away from the things that matter at your kitchen table. So grab a chair, pour a cup of coffee, and let's dive in to the good life. I am very excited for our first guest on this show. Jo Vitek is a retired police chief from Watertown. She spent a career in policing, leading law enforcement, teaching law enforcement, and has just lived a really, really amazing life. Jo, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Chris. It's good to be here.
Just so excited you're here. And I just gave the little teaser there about law enforcement, but do you want to maybe just give us like the high-level overview? I'll let you put it in your own words.
Well, sure. You're asking me to date myself, but that's okay. So I started in 1977 in Columbus, Georgia, my hometown, and it was the tail end of the traditional mode of policing before community policing began, right in the tail end of the civil rights movement. So it was a great career. What a blessing to start in that time frame. And so I policed in Georgia for about 12 years and then went to Florida and policed there for 17 years. And then, of course, came up to South Dakota in 2005. And as you said, took the police chief's job in Watertown. It was great. They'd never had a female police chief in the state at the time, and so that was exciting. And I was the first outsider in the city of Watertown to come in, and so all of those things were, just awesome opportunities. I finished my career in 2013. I retired and went to Lake Area Technical College, and they started a law enforcement program, so had the opportunity to build that program, create that program, and then we launched it in 2014, and I stayed with that program through 2020. And then Marty Jackley asked me or appointed me to serve on the Law Enforcement Commission for the state of South Dakota. So, I've been very, very blessed, and God has given me a tremendous opportunity to make a difference in the law enforcement community in Georgia, Florida, and then, now in South Dakota. And but yeah, just real blessed.
Well, we're blessed that you're here, and I'm just really grateful that you're here. And it's good, I think, to just have this overview of your work because it really informs, I think, your own story. And I want to dive into that story, and I want to begin with this this Fulton Sheen quote. I mean, he's just such an amazing preacher, and I'm stealing this from you, but it's just, I mean, it's the right place, I think, to start. Some of the real the good stuff in your own life, the hard stuff, but the good stuff too. And here's what Fulton Sheen has to say. He says there's two ways of knowing how good and loving God is. One is by never losing him through the preservation of innocence. The other is by finding him after one has lost innocence. Mm-hmm. Does that resonate?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It resonates with me. I grew up in the Southern Baptist Church in Columbus, Georgia. My daddy was a deacon, and so since I was 5 years old, I've been toting a Bible and tithing for that long as well. But I lost my innocence when I was 4 through sexual abuse. It was my father's older brother who sexually abused me, and it continued on until I was 9, and he died unexpectedly of a heart attack on Valentine's Day in 1967. And it was a year later when I disclosed the abuse. Of course, by then he was dead. And I got to tell you, when I told, my dad couldn't fathom that his brother, would do such a thing. So he didn't believe me. And I don't know, what hurt worse, the actual sexual abuse or my father not believing me. And so that caused a really deep wound in my heart that bled for many, many, many years. So as you might imagine, I had some struggles, and naturally so, because of the sexual abuse. And then a girlfriend of mine, if I fast forward it, a girlfriend of mine who lived next door, she invited me to attend a Methodist church. MYF is what it was called, Methodist Youth Fellowship, and it was the best thing ever. They had an awesome youth group, and so my folks allowed me to go because they used to be Methodist, right? And that became my second home. And I think, again, God reaching out, God, saving me, right, and keeping me from harm's way. And so I became Methodist, and it was only not until I was 35 when I became a Catholic. And so I call myself a Catho-Metho-Baptirian, because of the history there. So I've kind of been ecumenical my whole life.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Your church experience, though, and really feeling this call of God, it didn't necessarily leave you on the straight and narrow for your whole life, though, did it?
No, not at all.
Tell us more about that time in your life and kind of some wandering.
You betcha. I felt like God was calling me into ministry when I was about 15, and so I started pursuing that. And but then I had like 3 major incidents that took place, and they were setbacks, if you will. And one of them just really, really rocked my boat, so much so that it kind of crushed my faith. And I'm sure that in hindsight now that a lot of that probably would have been the fact that, I didn't receive any counseling. I didn't go to a doctor. There was no police report on the sexual abuse. So all of those things are still there, right? And having an adverse impact on your life. But at any rate, I kind of left out of the church one day, the Methodist church, kind of upset and mad, and a police car went by. And so that's how I jumped into that police career. And then in my 20s, you might say that I jumped off the Empire State Building, right, and fell from God's grace. And, I was promiscuous and just a variety of things. I was legal, right? I was a good cop, but I certainly wasn't moral by any means. And so I found myself pregnant at the age of 19 and kind of embarrassed, ashamed, not knowing what to do. And it was only 4 years after Roe versus Wade, and I had an abortion in 1977.
Was it I guess, can you just share with us how you're feeling at that moment in time? 1977 is a different time even than it is today. You're raised in this Baptist, God-fearing home. What was your experience at the time that led you to that decision?
I didn't tell anyone other than the father, and then also a trusted friend, if you will. And of course, like I said, 4 years, Roe versus Wade, and basically some of the advice that I received, not the best, because it was you're way too young to wreck your life, quote unquote. There would be a lot of missed opportunities if you went on with the pregnancy. And the truth of the matter is I was embarrassed and I was ashamed, and I was afraid to tell anybody. I was certainly afraid to go tell my parents because they were somewhat authoritative. And then I was gonna go into ministry, and now I'm doing this. And so I didn't know how to deal with it, and so I went through with the abortion, and that was very detrimental as well.
After that, did you feel any happier? Did anything in your life change after that?
Well, for the worse, because I continued on that in my 20s. You know, it was just a very lost time in my life, if you will.
Yeah.
I remember specifically, I was a cop, and I one evening I'd gone through another failed relationship. I had trouble with relationships, and you know, when you're sexually abused, you don't trust people, you know, or you're leery about that. And so I remember contemplating. Well, I didn't just contemplate it; I actually acted out an attempt to kill myself. And so I backed up my squad car on a gravel road, and it's like 3 a.m. in the morning, and you know, I was just spiraling out of control emotionally. And, you know, I was crying, I was upset, and yet it was 3 a.m. in the morning, so it was kind of quiet. And I pulled out my service revolver, I put it in my mouth, I had my finger on the trigger. Thank goodness it was a revolver, you know, in hindsight. And in my emotional turmoil, I heard this very small, quiet voice that said to me, I know everything. I know everything, Joe, and I love you. I know everything. And I heard that voice, and I put my gun away, and it was that point, that was a turning point when I, ever so slowly, crawling on my knees, with still, you know, with the stint of the pig pen on my soul, right? Yeah. And I started crawling back to God because I'd been away from the church. I'd stopped going to church. It's so easy, you know. You're working shift work and you got crazy hours and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. You know, there's every reason you can come up with every reason in the world to stay away from God, right? Yeah. Plus, I was mad at God too, right? Yeah. And so, again, you know, I was a great cop, but my personal life was a wreck. Yeah.
So you hear this voice, which is really amazing, and you recognized it.
I recognized,
you knew who it was. So this is a real a turning point.
Well, this is you know, God never gives up on us.
Yeah.
You know, no matter how far we get from Him, no matter how far we go away from Him, He continues to pursue us. Yeah. You know, and that's what He did that night, right? He pursued me. Yeah. And I had the realization that no matter what someone had done to me, and then no matter what I have done, because we have to, let's be honest, right? There's things that people do to us, but then there's stuff that we do, you know?
That's right.
But God pursues us and loves us anyway. And that's the beautiful thing, is that no matter what you've done, you know, the Father loves you.
So when you hear these words of, I know everything, mm-hmm. and I love you, mm-hmm. it permeates your heart, and your life begins to change in some ways after this.
Well, yeah, it's the Holy Spirit, it's the Lord working in you, you know, working through you. And you know, I talk to a lot of women, you know, and mostly women, some men, you know, that have really messed up in life, like me, right? Yeah. And I just tell them, hey, there's nothing that you can do that's going to stop God from loving you. Yeah. Nothing. And He wants to save everybody. He wants to save everybody.
Yeah. A little bit later in your life, you did end up marrying and had a beautiful relationship. Do you want to tell us a little bit about?
Yeah, you betcha. So I'm 35 years old, and in Florida, you know, and I meet this Baltimore cradle Catholic. Yeah. Tony Vitek was his name. He's passed away now. Yeah. And so, you know, he knew everything because I could share everything with him, you know. Yeah. And anyway, he loved me, and in spite of all of my failings, all my faults. And so we married, and you know, we had 25 years of a beautiful, beautiful relationship. And in that, I became Catholic. That's how I got the Catho-Metho-Baptirian part. Yeah. And so I became Catholic, and lots and lots and lots of Catholic priests and sisters that, you know, were so compassionate and so gentle, and helped me work through a lot of my brokenness, because there's those holes, there's those wounds, that are there that they don't go away. You can pretend that they don't exist. They don't go away. And so it's a process, right? Because we're journeying back to the Father.
That's right. You've talked before about your 40 years in law enforcement as sort of this time in the desert. I mean, 40 years is this very scriptural.
Yeah, very much so.
Can you say a little more about how you think the Lord was using that time in your life? And,
you betcha. Yeah. So, I realized that kind of like Moses, I did the 40 years in the desert. For me, it was law enforcement. A lot of people, and I remember when I had this realization, Moses did 2 stints in the desert. In the second 40 years in the desert, right? Yeah. I think it was the first 40 years that he spent that helped prepare him for what God had in store for him. So when I walked away from ministry, nowadays I have a nonprofit and we work with a lot of people that are, broken from sexual brokenness, child sexual abuse. And our mission is leading people into a thriving relationship with Jesus Christ. But it was there in law enforcement that God used all of those experiences where I saw things, and He pruned me, and like the vine, He pruned me, and He cut off those dead parts, and He showed me different things that didn't focus on myself, but helped me to focus on others, to focus on God and His purpose for my life. So I actually thought that God brought me to South Dakota to be the police chief. Well, I don't think that was it at all. Yeah. God brought me to South Dakota to do the work that we're doing today, and that is to help people, especially those wounded by child sexual abuse, to have a thriving relationship with Jesus Christ.
There's this image of pruning that you just shared, and I think sometimes we can be afraid of pruning because you got to cut things off in order to bear fruit.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. Is that a legitimate fear? This fear of how should people thinking of?
Well, fear is fear, and that prevents us from. Fear robs us of life, and of course, Satan thrives on that because he comes to to steal, kill, and destroy. Yes. And he'd love nothing more than for us to walk around and to be afraid. But the Lord, you see, He wants us to share our failings and our faults with each other, so that He can use those things to bring Him glory, but also to help others find Him. Yeah. And so here we are, ashamed of whatever it was that occurred in our lives, whether it was something somebody did to us or something that we did to ourselves, right, or to someone else. Yeah. And the Lord wants us to use these things openly to help other people find Him.
Yeah, I want to come back to nonprofit ministry that you just mentioned, and the mission that you share is to lead people, especially those wounded by child sexual abuse and assault, into a thriving relationship with Jesus Christ and to strengthen churches in South Dakota. Yeah. Can you share more with us about those ministries and the people you serve?
You betcha.
And healing.
Yeah. So there's 4 ministries, and they're all grassroots initiatives, and later we put a lid on them, if you will, but we work with children, Hope Healing Hoof Prints, Equine Experiences at Joy Ranch, and I love that, and these are kids that have been sexually abused, and they come out and we ride horses at a place called Joy Ranch, just outside of Watertown. And then there's Hope Healing, there's Hope in God, which is adult survivors of child sexual abuse, men and women. We've published 4 books now, and we help people write their stories and kind of get their arms around those things. And the story no longer owns them, but God with them, and through His grace, they're able to to reframe what happened to them and make it and turn it into something positive. Then we provide pulpit supply throughout Protestant churches, right? Yeah. Throughout the northeast corner of the state, and preacher might be out or whatever, and there's a bunch of us that do that. And then last but not least, we provide strategic planning and SWOT analysis, but it's all about building God's kingdom. It's really, truly, the Great Commission to go out, and it's discipleship, lifelong discipleship through God's love. It really is. It's just saying it another way, right? Where we're going out and we're spreading the kingdom because it's about everybody. The Lord came to save everybody, especially those that are lost, right? And to bind up those that are brokenhearted. Yes. And that's the reason Jesus came.
What are some of the fruits of those ministries that have touched your heart the most?
For sure, it's got to be the kids,
Yeah.
because we fell upon this through happen chance. We used to do one-on-one sessions, and then we started doing group sessions because there was too many.
Yeah.
And so what happened was we realized the strength that they found in seeing that they weren't the only ones that this has happened to.
Sure.
And they had that realization that, you mean I'm not by myself? Because oftentimes these crimes happen in isolation.
Yes.
And the kid thinks they're the only one.
Mm-hmm.
And so then when they realize that I'm not by myself, that there's other people out there too. And so the shame factor kind of goes away. I talk about carrying around 2 suitcases, shame and blame, and we do that so often in our lives. And again, Satan thrives on that kind of stuff because it prevents us from being the people that God created us to be.
One of the ministries is pulpit supply, filling in if maybe pastor's going on vacation or maybe he just wants to bring you in to hear the message.
You betcha.
What, if we've got pastors listening in right now, Protestant or Catholic churches, what's a message that you'd have for them as leaders of the church in our beloved state?
I want you to realize that your audience and sitting in the pews of your churches, statistics we know pretty much across the nation, not just South Dakota. 1 out of 4 women, 1 out of 6 men have been sexually abused as a child.
Yeah.
That's who's sitting in your pews. Yeah. And they're probably less likely to trust people. They're probably less likely to trust God. And, and yet God loves them like crazy.
Yeah.
And so you might have to, go out of your way a little bit more to recognize the fact that you got that brokenness sitting in your pews. And don't be afraid of it. Don't be ashamed of it. But if you are, preacher, you can call Jo Vitek, Divine Prophets of South Dakota. We're not afraid of it because we've walked that valley, that shadow of, that valley of not death, but that valley of child sexual abuse. Yeah. And we understand it. And I believe that Jesus came back showing his wounds, right?
Yes.
Because he wasn't embarrassed of the wounds that someone else inflicted on him. Amen. And so it's nothing to be ashamed of. And then if you, like me, you've done some things you shouldn't have done, like abortion, right? Yeah. And you violated those 10 commandments and all that other kind of stuff, that there's forgiveness.
Yes. And
that there's love. And that there's nothing that you can do that's going to separate you from the love of God in Jesus Christ.
Yes.
So, just remember that and hold on to that.
Yeah, I'll ask you again at the end, but just let's get the number out there. If
you betcha.
Want to get a hold of you.
Yeah, just call me, 605-880-6201. That's my cell phone.
Okay.
If you call me, I guarantee you I'll answer it. If for some reason I'm on the phone, voicemail will kick in. Yeah. I'll call you back. The Lord's put that on my heart. He brought me to South Dakota not to be the police chief of Watertown. Yeah. That was just a step, of the way. The Lord brought me here to do what we're doing today. Amen. And, so that's what it's about, helping people get to heaven.
We're so blessed that you're here. One of the other groups that I'd really like to just ask you, what might you say to them is any young woman, or maybe there's a young man in a relationship with a young woman who's going through a really tough time right now, maybe an unexpected pregnancy, maybe an unwanted pregnancy, and they're thinking about abortion. In South Dakota, abortion's not legal right now, but right across the border, state of Minnesota, it's not hard to travel, and so it's still something on people's minds. What would you say to those young people?
Well, I'd say to you that when I was 19, right, wrong, or indifferent, I did not comprehend, I did not think about, I did not understand that I had a life inside of me. I did not. I didn't realize, or I didn't appreciate the sanctity of human life at that time in my life. It was just a thing. But I can assure you it's not just a thing. Yeah. It's a human life. Yeah. And it's very holy, and it's been sanctified by God, otherwise it wouldn't be there. Yeah. And so just pause, pray, call me, and I'll talk to you, and I'll tell you where I've been, and I'll share with you some more, right? That's what I would say is pause, and just ask God, because he loves you like crazy. Yeah. He's going to provide. He always does. That's why we call our ministry Divine Providence, right? God's going to provide, no matter what you think. He's going to make a way. Yeah. And it's going to be okay.
You had this experience so many years ago of sitting in your squad car and thinking about ending your own life and you hear this wonderful, this voice of love. I know everything and I love you. For a person that's maybe in a similar position of just feeling really, they don't know where they're at in life, totally lost, afraid, everything's upside down, things aren't going well, but they don't have that voice,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe they want to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
What encouragement might you offer to that person who hasn't had that voice that's been so reassuring?
Well, first of all, I want to tell you that if you're like me and you're a survivor of child sexual abuse, if you've had some other kind of experience that just rocked your boat and turned it inside out and upside down, I want to tell you that, that you're normal.
Yeah.
I want to tell you that you're normal. I can't tell you how many women and men that I've told them they were normal for feeling the way they're feeling, and they look and they say, "You mean I'm normal?" Yeah. I'm like, heck yeah, because if someone did that to me, I'd be feeling like you do, totally devastated. Yeah. But God's got a game plan. Yeah. And God takes everything, all of our circumstance, every single bit of it, and He'll take it and He'll turn it into something good. Yeah. We just have to walk down that road, and we have to believe, and we have to trust. And again, call me. Yeah. And I'll talk to you and walk with you. And that's the beautiful thing about people that have already been there, because we're all on this journey together. Yeah. And some of us, we're just further down the road than where we were, but Lord knows I was there. Yes. And so I get it.
Yeah. For one of the person in my mind right now is maybe somebody who hasn't really thought about all these real stories, or we're about to get inundated with political messaging.
Gotcha.
in the months and weeks ahead. And it's so many times you see a billboard or you see a yard sign or you hear that little tiny clip on the radio. And we're being marketed to, and we forget about these real stories. Mm-hmm. So I want to just really thank you. Hearing your story has been amazing. And maybe one last time, just the name of the ministry and how people can get a hold of you.
You betcha.
And who you're serving.
Divine Providence of South Dakota. We're at 605-880-6201. We're located in Watertown, South Dakota. There's a bunch of us, and we don't have any employees. We've got a couple of interns from college, but other than that, we're volunteers. And we're called by the Lord to do this because we've been there. And so, we'll walk with you and help you, because it's a journey.
Well, thank you for this conversation.
You betcha. Thank you, Chris.
And to all of our listeners, whether you're listening on the internet, on Real Presence Radio, or on KELO AM radio out of Sioux Falls, to all of our friends and neighbors who have joined us on today's episode of The Good Life, thanks for joining us.